Good evening, and thank you for joining us on ESP Speaks. Tonight, I have an extremely special guest with us. She is a healthcare professional. She's a certified nurse midwife. She is a women's healthcare practitioner, and she also happens to be a very dear, dear part of my life. I'm not going to tell you how. I'm not going to tell you why, but as soon as she comes on screen, I think you'll gather who she is to me. A little bit before we bring her on, a little bit about the show. I know you guys are trying to get used to the new look and the new feel of ESP Speaks. We're doing things a different way, and we are now on our normal platforms, which are Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Twitch. Now we're on YouTube Live, we're on Facebook, and we're on Instagram Live. And we also appear on several random pages throughout Facebook, depending on who the guest is. But once again, coming back to our guest, tonight, this very, very special guest is going to talk about a subject that's very close and dear to me, and it's women's health. What we need to do in this system in the United States to take care of ourselves, and this very special isolated area of women's health is pregnancy, gynecological study, and midwifery. Now, I come from a long line of doctors and midwives and nurses. So once again, this individual has taken up the mantle and made this family so proud. So please join me in welcoming my guest, Aiyana Davison.
I'm a board-certified women's health nurse practitioner. I am founder of the Vagina Chronicles. I am a daughter. I am a friend, I'm a sister, an auntie, I'm a niece, a cousin, I am a colleague, I am a sister in midwifery work. Above all else, I'm a Black woman. And I'm a Black woman who lives in America. And I'm a Black woman who actually provides care in America to other Black women. And there is a heaviness to that. I love being a Black woman. I absolutely do. But it comes at a cost. And so often, Black women are undervalued and overproduced. We are expected to do way more. We're obligated to do way more. And we don't get recognition for it. We don't get the help that we need, and we are unheard. And that is a scary but truthful fact. I hope you've heard already, but if you haven't, Black women are 2 to 3 more times likely to die during pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum periods than white counterparts. That can't be real in 2020. I think to myself that very often. This can't be real. But indeed it is. We are 2 to 3 more times as likely to die during these experiences than white people. And there's been much discussion about why this could be true, We've heard postpartum hemorrhage, maybe. We've heard chronic conditions before the pregnancy, so high blood pressure, diabetes, maybe critical events like a pulmonary embolism, a clot traveling inside the large vessels. We've heard access to care is an issue. We've heard Black people not taking their care seriously or non-compliant. We've heard so many things. And the stereotypes that come before us, that we are loud and angry, set us up for unsuccessful events and journeys through our healthcare. Again, we're in 2020. But I want to make it clear to you, and I hope that all of this resonates with you and activates fire in your spirit to go out and make change. We can list those reasons, and perhaps they contribute to some of the deaths, even C-sections, complications from that, complications from an epidural, all of that. At the end of the day, the reason behind these outcomes is rooted in one thing, and that's racism. It is treating someone different because they look different. And until we fully recognize that, these outcomes are going to stay the same. And there's more than one aspect, more than one place where you're going to find this in the systems that make up America. One of the systems is medical school. I had the privilege of attending medical school classes as a post-baccalaureate candidate years ago. And you sit in a classroom where you hear different things about different people based off of their race. And it's still to this day ingrained heavily that Black people don't feel pain the same way that white people do, so they don't require pain management, or they become the pain management seekers. We hear so many different things that are simply not true. And what's funny is the pain scale that we use to determine how much pain a person is in says pain is whatever a person says it is. Yet we are still not believed when we go into the hospital. Stereotypes that go before us, like being loud. Well, when we've been silent and we've been complacent to what you've asked us to do, you haven't listened. So sometimes raising our voice on the behalf of ourselves, our children, our family members is the only way we know to get your attention. And then you still continue to ignore us because we're too loud. I want to drive home that Black people, Black women in particular, need to be listened to. We're not just here to spew out of the mouth. We're here because we want to live. We're here because we're human. We are humans sitting in front of you, another human, just begging for you to recognize that we matter. And each day that we continue on like this, the systems don't get any better. I'm not asking for change right immediately at this moment, because for such a large system, that's not going to happen overnight. It wasn't designed that way, and it's not going to crumble that way. But there is much work to be done in dismantling the racism that is heavily ingrained in healthcare. And there's a few things that can be done. First off, Black people, when going into the hospital, need support. I know this is a crazy time with COVID. I know that it's unprecedented and we haven't seen things and policies are changing, but a basic right is to have somebody by your side during the labor process to support you. It's inhumane for someone to be going through that process. If you've ever seen it, if you know what it entails, if you haven't, if you've never seen this, you don't know, I'm telling you, pregnancy, labor, postpartum is not meant to be done alone. We are not designed that way. We're human. We're meant to be in community. So one of the things that can be done, people who can come in and advocate, who can know what birth looks like and support somebody through that, who know when something doesn't sit right, those people need to be by the side of Black people as they are in these spaces. Who does this work? Doulas. Doulas are more than just a birth coach. They are knowledgeable and in tune with the pregnant person. They help with breastfeeding, another challenge that we struggle with, and our numbers are still on the decline with that. Black women don't breastfeed as much, and it's not just because, oh, I don't want to, or I'm lazy, or it's frustrating. It's a very difficult process. It's that there's a lack of support. And if we look back further, the over-sexualization, the fetishizing of Black people and their bodies, we have this disconnect between ourselves and feeding our children because of these things that have happened to us in the past. Also, we were forced to breastfeed or wet nurse as slaves, or enslaved people. And so there is this generational built-in system that has broken us down to not even be able to feed our own children in the way that we want to. Not anymore. Things like Black Breastfeeding Week, things like having a doula support, having lactation support that looks like you, that's another key point, are the things that are going to drive us to better outcomes. I guarantee it. Again, this is coming from a Black woman, so it needs to be heard, and we need to be listening to Black women. When we say the things that matter to us, when we say what it is that's going to help us, please hear us. We're not saying it for our health. Actually, we are. We're saying it to drive home the important factors that will make change in what has been going on. It's so important for us to see ourselves in our providers. We don't have that many Black doctors. We don't have that many Black midwives or healers. We don't have many Black practitioners who we can go to and trust. And to be fair, we know that not everybody who is Black will necessarily treat us any differently, but oftentimes when we see ourselves in our provider, we have more reassurance. We are able to let our guard down and be felt and heard and seen in a place that we know someone will understand us. It's important for us to diversify these spaces. In addition, research is another critical area where Black people need to be seen and heard. For far too long, over the course of the time during slavery, Black folks were mistreated and abused. We were used as specimen without our consent. We were operated on without anesthetics. We had stitches put into us without the proper numbing medication. Can you imagine? This is all documented. And it was for the betterment of other people who didn't look like us. It wasn't for us. That research that was done, those studies, that trial, those things weren't done for our behalf. They were done for white people. So it's necessary for us to have spaces in research where we are the participants, but we are also the conductors of the research. And then we go and we share that information with our community so that they know, hey, this is what's happening to us. This is what it looks like when X, Y, and Z happens. So again, Black maternal health and neonatal health is not in a good place. It's time for it to change. And the change starts with you. We absolutely matter. We are not saying we matter more than anybody else. We are not saying that we deserve this special type of care that goes well beyond what everyone else receives. We're asking for the basics. And we shouldn't have to beg, but here we are. So I hope you'll take this information with you. I hope you will take the time to really investigate and to learn. And if you're wanting to be an ally to figure out what that looks like, but also recognize that sometimes in your allyship it means being quiet. It means actually listening to Black people. And I hope you work to drive change, to deconstruct, dismantle, and improve what has been happening to Black people here in this nation.
You're just so beautiful. There you go. Okay, well, with that wonderful, rousing introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what's happening in that video? That video, I almost cried when I watched that video several times. But tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So my name is Aiyana Davison, as you've mentioned, certified nurse midwife and women's health nurse practitioner. I am currently based in Southern California, working at a large teaching facility in a hospital, which we can talk about later because most people think that midwives are solely in the home and birth center, but we practice anywhere people are, and reproductive care is needed. And so I've been in practice for just about 5 years, and really am focusing on not only the struggles that Black mamas face in the US, but also preserving the legacy of Black midwifery and just allowing folks to use their voice and getting rid of, excuse me, getting rid of the secrecy that we tend to hold in our community as opposed to allowing ourselves to heal through sharing. So those are some of the things that I focus on. And yeah.
All right, so I want to ask you a couple of questions based on some thoughts that I've gotten from women's groups that I deal with. I speak to them often about midwifery because, of course, your grandmother was a medical hint, hint, hint. Now you're understanding why she looks so much like me, guys. But she was a midwife as well. And in those days, back in the 30s and the 40s, and even before then, midwives were the only thing that they had. That's what got women through this process of birth.
Right.
But one of the things that the misconceptions that people have, or women have, is that midwives are something from the olden days. They're not something that are accessible right now. In fact, I'd go as far as to say they're not something that's necessary right now. When conversely, they are more necessary than they ever have been.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to start from the positioning of COVID.
Okay.
In the medical system right now, you go in, even if it's a simple procedure, you're going in by yourself.
Correct.
Now, to deliver a life, as you so indicated in your video, this is not something that was meant to be done alone.
At all.
You need a village, you need your women, you need your family near you for this process. And as it is in America, we've been so disconnected from the natural process of having a child laying down with our feet up in stirrups instead of standing up and buckling down and letting gravity help with the event. We need doulas back with us. We need midwives back with us. Mm-hmm. So how are you as a midwife dealing with educating people into using the culture once again for their benefit? That's number one. Number two, are they allowing you to come into the hospitals for delivery? Because they're not even allowing the husbands in sometimes during COVID. And number three, how are you setting up the cases to work with the women long term? Because pregnancy really is 10 months long. So that's a broad spectrum question for you to work with.
Are you gonna remember all these? Because
Oh yeah, listen, I know where you came from. I got you.
I'll need redirection back. So to answer in part your question, in order to answer the questions about the time during COVID, we actually have to have a full understanding of what midwifery is on a whole anyway. For folks who don't know, there is a difference between a midwife and a doula. A doula is going to be your birth support or postpartum support. There's all types of doulas. They are somebody to help coach you along in whatever journey you're on. There are sex doulas, there are end of life doulas, there are pregnancy loss doulas. So, if you're having a miscarriage, that kind of thing, they have doulas for a wide variety of reasons. And so those are folks who are going to come in and they're not they're not in charge of diagnosis, they're not in charge of medical procedures or giving medical care per se, but they are to care for you during your journey. So if we're going to be specific about pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, they are going to be the ones walking beside you, encouraging you through what you should eat, what you're experiencing, the expectations for birth management and beyond. Midwives do something similar, but we also are licensed practitioners. So we are, as I mentioned before, I'm a women's health nurse practitioner. If you can imagine that, a certified nurse midwife, that's the equivalent. In addition, I also attend births. And so the reason why I say we have to understand what a midwife, doula, those different roles are before I can answer the COVID question is we have midwives who practice in the hospital. I am contracted with somebody and I work in a hospital. That's where I am. I'm not going to be there forever, but that's where I work. And so I am expected to attend.
So you are the medical personnel that is there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
We're trained in physiological birth, or what we call normal birth, and normal pregnancy, normal postpartum, in addition to a wide variety of other things. But when it becomes abnormal, because we know the normal so well, that's when we lean on people like doctors and higher level care practitioners who can offer more assistance in a high-risk situation. We can manage some minor high-risk things, but for the most part, we deal with low-risk pregnancy, birth, postpartum. I also like to mention abortion care, STD screening, your pap smears, birth control management. We do a wide variety of things. And so I know you mentioned before, midwives are still around. We never really left.
Exactly.
We never left. So that's the basis. And when you're considering COVID, I think right now doulas are having a harder time getting into the hospital system. If you're getting care from a midwife outside of the hospital and have to be transferred in, that's a little dependent on state, dependent on hospital. Sometimes your midwife can come in with you. Sometimes they may not be able to. You always hope that if you are getting care from a midwife outside and have to be transferred to a hospital, that you're transferring to midwifery care, because then that keeps it kind of under the same umbrella. We cannot vouch, I can't vouch for how someone else practices, but midwife to midwife, you hope you can have that kind of transfer if needed. So there's that. In COVID, it's been difficult because it's strange for myself, it's strange for patients, and especially in early April, when things were really, end of March, early April, things are really transitioning from COVID pandemic. What do we do? A lot of things that I was seeing is people are scared, and people want to have a certain experience for their birth and should be allowed to, but because of hospital policy, some of that had been taken away. And that's unfortunate. And it depends on your state. It depends again on your hospital, their policies, what they've put in place. There were some facilities that weren't allowing anyone in. And again, that's inhumane and it goes against your human rights. But for the most part, I know that patients now can come in for their birth with a partner when I'm seeing them in clinic, it's usually by themselves. I know maybe some facilities are doing it where the partner can come in. So I make it very clear from the beginning, like, I know, and it's changed to telephone visits or video visits too. So
Hmm.
that's um, a whole other can of worms. But I let my parents know from beginning, hey, I know I'm talking to you on the phone. We haven't met yet. You have no idea like who I am, and I get to know you through these phone calls, and then you'll see me in person. It's just going to be a while, but I want you to know that your partner, whoever it is involved in, either conception or whoever you consider a partner who's going to help you raise this child, they're very much involved in this process. And so if they want to FaceTime, if they want to call while you're here in the clinic, please let them know and feel free to do so. It's completely fine, because again, this process is not meant to be done solely by
Alone.
yourself.
Are there still birthing centers? I remember that was a big thing in the 90s. It's been a while for me because, this whole process of my life is over. But that used to be a big thing with the pool, and, you had the whole room set up. And do they still exist?
Yes, for sure. So there are many birth centers. I know New York is really pushing for legislation where folks can have more access to birth centers. There are birth centers. It's sometimes something that's difficult to maintain, from what I understand,
Mhm.
because there are guidelines and regulations. Funding is an issue. Personally, for myself, I know that that's a vision that's been given to me, and I would love to open one day. And when the time is coming, I'll let your followers know so they can donate. But a lot of folks are opening birth centers these days by donation, or maybe there's grants. And the bottom line is, you mentioned a huge word, which is access. And midwives, what we do in our work is provide more access for people. So if we can get the legislation, if we can get the funding, if we can have these birth centers open and running, and signing off on home birth, which is, again, it varies from state to state. That allows for more access. I'm in California. You can go for a radius of miles and there's no access to care. In Georgia, folks and these are rural areas, folks have like this one local hospital, but that might be an hour away, whereas
Mhm.
like maybe their midwife could be in between. But again, because of different legislation and the wording of how we can practice, sometimes we're limited in the amount of care we can give to folks. And I just like to say, like, it's not a midwife. Our position isn't to take away care or money from like a physician. Really, we work well in conjunction with each other, and then in conjunction with a team. So we really just want to provide this access for people so that they can get the care that they desperately need.
Definitely. It's all about enhancement,
Mhm.
enhancement.
Mhm.
So now, I'm going to step away from the hospital concept for a
Sure.
moment,
Mhm.
because I really want the listeners to know about this wonderful association, this organization that you have called the Vagina Chronicles. I talk about it all the time.
Mhm.
And I've always said that we're going to have her on the show, we're going to have her on the show. And you're finally here, so I'm very excited. But we've understood that your schedule has always been an issue because you deliver in little ones. You playing catch up for the little ones coming. So tell us a little bit about the vagina. No, tell us a lot about the Vagina Chronicles.
Sure. The Vagina Chronicles started, I don't want to say it started as a joke, but it was me joking around with the term. And because literally my life is like the Vagina Chronicles,
Yes.
it's like what's happening today, whether it be testing for an infection or your pap smear, or talking about if this is a planned or unplanned pregnancy, or doing a postpartum exam. Like, that's the majority of what I do on a day-to-day as a midwife. So it started out like I would occasionally use the hashtag like the Vagina Chronicles. And then it became a matter of I think at the end of 2017, I was in this really weird space where I was being overworked, or allowing myself to be overworked, drained, wanting to provide exceptional care, but also like finding my footing as a midwife like early on. And so we went to go see a screening with one of my good friends who's actually a doula now. And we went to see a screening of Death by Delivery. And this is a documentary that's been put out. I know it's on PBS, and it talks about the crisis that Black women face here in America, the maternal morbidity and mortality rates. And again, New York is one of the higher, the higher, how do I say it?
Just say it.
The numbers are really high in terms of death during and shortly after.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show, because women are not aware of this. The women in New York, the women of color, Black women in New York, are not aware of what they're walking into when they're walking into this situation. So you right now are going to give a broader spectrum and a bigger education as to how prepared we really need to be and how we can prepare to be in the situation, because you're their education for today. So thank you very much. On that note, we're going to take a little break right here, and we're going to be back in a moment. We're sitting with Aiyana Davison from the Vagina Chronicles.org. Did I get it right? It's .org, it's not .com? Okay, Vagina Chronicles. She is a certified healthcare professional with more letters behind her name than the entire alphabet, and we're going to have them broken down for you. But we'll be back in a moment. Come hang with us.
Yo, what's good, chick?
Hey.
Question for you guys.
Oh,
here we go.
on.
Shoot.
You want to play along.
You always doing it.
Anyway, I want to know, what is it that you are obsessed with?
Oh, well, you ask, you
like
answer
that.
first.
Yeah, I'll tell you mine.
Go
I'm
for
obsessed with chocolate. That's in the form of candy, men.
You did not just throw men in there.
Are there little chocolate men running around? Because I eat them up,
with you, girl. I hear you.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
I hear you.
Well, look,
I'll tell you, I'm obsessed with the way people are butchering the English language. We need to get it together.
We know you want to be teacher to the world, so.
I mean, yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
But
ain't got nothing.
I do. I'm obsessed with getting my vagina vajazzled.
Oh, really?
Yes, really.
Oh,
you'll see me coming from miles
away.
away.
She cannot be
miles
our
away.
sister. No way.
That
Don't
is
get it done.
Yes, I do. Thank you. No, it's not. That sounds cool.
Way damn
it does.
Upgrade her diamonds, now her girlfriends are like, whoa. I hit recorded drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets. When I'm performing, never boring, now you can't afford it.
Hey y'all, I am checking in today with you to see where your heart is at. Where's your energy? How are you feeling? Have you taken a moment to take some breaths? Have you taken a moment to walk away, to turn off social media? Maybe you're not even here and you're seeing this later. I hope you are, and taking the time out for you. I want to remind you to protect yourself, protect your mental well-being, protect your physical well-being, to turn off your phone if you need to, to be with family and loved ones if you need to sit in a tub, to sage, to write, to reflect, to eat something good and hearty and healthy. Whatever you need to make it through, I want you to do that today.
Welcome back to ESP Speaks. We're here with Aiyana Davison, the healthcare professional, certified nurse, midwife, and women health nurse practitioner. She's out in California right now, but the information that she's providing for our women is global. So before we went on the commercial break, Aiyana, and I hope you enjoyed our 4 chicks, we were talking about being in the hospitals, the morbidity rates, the effects of what happens when we walk through the door, and how prepared we need to be prior to for this experience.
Yeah, so that's loaded, and I could talk about this kind of thing for hours, so feel free to cut me.
Oh, go ahead. Go.
So
it's needed. We really need this.
I think that many people are realizing what's happening, because you have like a few celebrities like Serena Williams. Beyonce talked about toxemia, which is also known as preeclampsia, and her struggles. Excuse me. And then there are more people who are beginning to share their stories, which is important. Again, this is like one of my goals, is to make sure that we are healing through sharing our stories or storytelling, and our own stories, not someone else telling our stories as Black people, because for decades they continue to do that as well. And then also stopping the secrecy, because the more we keep these things to ourselves, we're not doing any justice to ourselves or our people or community. We're actually traumatizing ourselves or hurting ourselves more. So at any rate, New York has some large numbers, and Georgia does as well. Overall, I think nationwide our C-section rate is like about 30% or more, which is pretty high. So that's saying quite often someone is going to end up in a C-section, and that's just not necessarily how it needs to be, but it's how it's been dictated to us for quite some time.
Exactly. But I'm going to stop you there, because your grandmother, which is my mother, hint, hint again, she often would speak about, we didn't do C-sections, in her West Indian accent. We waited upon the picnic for come. You heat up the perineum and you wait for the child to come. And labor would go on and on and on. Whereas now, if you're not done within 36 hours or 24 hours or whatever, they're rushing you into a C-section for fear of traumatizing the child. Some of these kids need to be a little traumatized from the beginning of life, but that's a whole nother story. But do you find that in the system of healthcare right now, we are rushing the experience for a commercial purpose?
I mean, it's about numbers, and it's not about a physiological thing, which is what midwifery and doulas are focusing on, birth workers. I mean, I will care for anybody who wants an epidural. You want pain management, cool. But what I'm looking at is your labor going the way that it, quote unquote, should. Is it happening in the physiological way? And again, that is your body's process of doing something. We're designed to do this. And so, yeah, of course, like if you're not meeting standards, and I have someone on my back who's looking at me like, well, why isn't this patient delivered? So it does put that kind of a rush to something that is not to be rushed. You have to wait on a baby. And we live in a society where everything has to happen like this, at least in the US. And so when we talk about even the pregnancy alone, 40 weeks and this is my due date, it's literally called an estimated due date. If we knew the precise day that your baby was coming, we wouldn't have any worries. We'd be like, well, okay. And we could prepare for preterm labor, all that kind of stuff. Why would we even bother with our job? But what it is what we have to realize is these things take time. your baby is going to come when your baby comes. There is a certain time where we want to be a little bit more cautious. And so we'll kind of monitor you a little bit more, check in with you more, especially towards the end of your pregnancy. But like, I know it hurts. I know it's heavy. I know you're ready to have this kiddo out. You want to breathe. You want to be able to digest food better. You want to not be constipated, all of the above. But your baby needs to be ready too. And also what we take for granted is you have to mentally be in a space where it's safe to deliver. And COVID does not, and these times do not present as a safe time. So if you have not reckoned with that in your mind, then you having your baby in this, what we call physiological way, may not happen, right away. So it's important, again, the preparatory work is important. And I always emphasize, if you ever want to conceive, you could be 15 now listening to this, your preparation begins now. You need to think about how you're treating your body, what it'll look like when you become pregnant, the cost of pregnancy if you want care outside of the hospital and even inside the hospital, because depending on your insurance, it will make a difference in what you have to pay at the end of the day. And your exercise, your movement, all those things are key to pregnancy. And we take it all for granted and expect that you're just gonna have this lovely pregnancy. And then I hear people talking about getting my baby body back or pre-baby weight. It takes a full year for you to adjust to a baby coming out of a hole through your body. I don't care if it's a C-section or through your vagina. Like, literally, it takes you time. And it's so important for people. Like, it's okay to have time. It's okay to wait. Like, as long as everything's going okay and you're within that normal range. I use that term loosely, but that's what I'll call it. As long as everything's going okay, like, give yourself that time, know.
Let's talk about pain management. You touched on that briefly, because I want to speak specifically with women of color in the hospital system, because that in itself is a whole generational story that people do not understand that they're dealing with when they walk through the doors. Black women are looked at as machines and mechanics. And when we ask for pain meds, I'm going to let you run from there, because you are not only a Black woman, but you are a mama to hundreds of children, and you manage literally the in and the out of these souls. So tell us about pain management in the Black woman.
Pain management, I mean, what they teach you versus what they want you to believe in school, and this is for practitioners, is two different things. We say that pain is whatever the person says it is. That's point blank, period. But when it comes to the application of that, it's quite different. So, I mean, even in medical school, folks are taught that Black people tolerate pain better, they don't feel pain, or if we're asking for pain medication, we're drug seeking. And that's simply not the case. Like, my body has the same kind of nerve endings that yours does. I'm still a human, and so I still feel pain, and it's important for people to understand that. So from a practitioner side, it's taking ourselves out of it's unlearning what we've been taught and taking the experience outside of ourselves. It's not about me. It's about the person who's in front of me. So whatever you tell me is going on, I must listen to, I must believe, because it's happening to you. Right. So, so in terms like the pain management, you have plenty of options in the hospital, but if you go in with a plan to, let's say you wanted to go unmedicated for your childbirth experience, then that's something that they should honor. It's also something you should prepare for. Like, I think too, people don't don't really give credit to the pain that goes into contraction
Oh.
and labor and the length of time. Like, people think like, oh, one day I'm just gonna go into labor. No, if you're a first-time mama, and I use that term to cover everybody. So that's anyone, a birthing person, anyone who's going to be holding a pregnancy, however you identify. But if you're a first-time birther, first-time parent, the last couple weeks of leading up to your birth, you could be contracting on and off for weeks at a time. And I have people who come into the hospital for labor checks every 2 days, and honey, you are still the same. You are still the same. And this is where the preparation is key. And so you have these large healthcare systems that have to process people in and out, because that's what they're doing. We're not really giving them the care that they require or deserve. And so you're being seen in this quick 15 to 20 minute appointment if you're in the hospital system, maybe sometimes more if you have a private insurance or private doctor, not a community-based doctor. And so they're going to tell you, oh yeah, just when your contractions get to this phase. No one's actually going over this information of, you could be doing this for 2 weeks. You could be 1 centimeter for a very long time. But you could also have your water break and, nothing's going on for a while. You could also precipitously or quickly go through labor. Who's to say? I can't tell
Different
you.
with every case.
Different with every case. And so the preparation is it's key. And again, this is where your relationship with a doula or someone who has been through this process before and is reliable and not just sharing their story to just talk about it, but also to help you through in whatever way they can. That's where that is important.
How important is it to have a good physical sense of self prior to the pregnancy in itself? I mean, there are some women who, for years, they don't want to get pregnant, and then all of a sudden they decide, all right, it's time, I want to get pregnant now. They go out, they get pregnant, or with their partners, they get pregnant, and they feel, okay, because I said I'm ready, I'm ready. They don't understand that you should be exercising, you should be eating properly, you should be building up your mineral system. What do you say to those women who are about to do what I just said? How are you going to say, hey, wake up?
Well, that's to backtrack, that's like the premise of the Vagina Chronicles. I was sitting in the office, and I've sat in the office several times, and in front of someone who has just birthed a baby, and they don't know that we have 3 different holes down below. Like, you pee, you have a baby in your period, and you poop from a different area. Like, people don't know that. I don't know if I can say that on air, but I'm doing it.
You're fine. You're fine. How do you not know this? There are still people in this day and age that think it all comes from the same place.
You have a full baby and are saying this thing. Like, you have a baby, you're sitting in front of me with a baby, and you still don't know this information. So that's where, like, it was like, oh, no. Like, we have to do better. I have to do better. And I tell my patients, look, I run late. But guess what? In that appointment, if you bring your questions, I'm going to answer
all of them. Good.
We're going to go over everything in a condensed form. And I also tell patients too, like, you have to invest in care outside of what I'm giving to you in my particular instance. Now, if I'm working outside in a home or birth center setting, I get an hour with my patients. I can sit down with you and go over point blank, these are the things that you should be expecting. This is how I want you to be able to prepare for your birth, etc. So there's that part. I'm trying to remember what your actual question was. Sorry.
No, you're on track. You are definitely on track. I was talking about pain management, specifically with Black women, and you did address that, and gave us more. You did address it. Okay, but my thing was, I was waiting for you to finish that and create. I understand where you felt off. What it was, I added something to it, and I said, tell the women who think just because they said, I want to stop and get pregnant, and they actually do, because even that's not as easy as people think. Right. Just because you stop taking the pill does not mean that you're going to get pregnant with this buildup of chemicals in your system. Sometimes that's a journey in itself. But for the ones who did get pregnant and think, all right, because I'm ready now, this is going to be this wonderful experience. I wanted you to give the information to prep them, which you did.
Yeah.
So you said you were on track.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, you asked too about how important it is to know yourself. And like, you must know your body. You got to know what your body does and its cyclical changes, because that's a thing that happens, to know when something isn't right so that you can go in and get care and help for something that doesn't feel well. Right. It's important to understand what your body's going to go through in pregnancy. Oh, I have this low back pain. Do you understand the uterus has grown? It's twisted a little bit. And now that baby, and that baby's head is shifting your spine out of the way. That's why you feel like that. And it's compressing a nerve back there. That's why you have all this pain down your bottom and into your thigh. Or I can't breathe and my heart rate is increasing. Well, or I feel like my heart is beating fast. Well, as you sit there, you know, your body is supplying this baby, and that requires a whole new level of blood, a whole new amount of blood. We create more blood to supply the uterus, which makes you feel like, when you're sitting down, and makes you feel like you can't breathe, you know? So these are like the components. You need to know the basics. You're going to show up and get pregnant and have no clue, and then continue on. And then you spill that down to your child too. Like, it's important for us, not only for ourselves, but for future generations, to really understand who we are and how we work. I'm not saying like you have to know the FSH increases and LH decreases. Like, you don't need to know all that. If you want to, by all means, but you do need to have a basic understanding of, my periods last for about 5 days. I was on the pill for 10 years. I know that when I come off of it, maybe it might take some time, but also maybe my fertility will return quickly. You know, I know that my mother had quick labors. All these things are so important to know and understand. So,
Breathe in and out.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break just so we can inhale all of this information, give our audience a chance to run to the ladies' room, men's room, whichever room they're going to, or whatever they identify. That's how I'm supposed to say it nowadays. And we'll be back in a second with Aiyana Davison, certified nursing midwife, healthcare professional, women's health professional, and owner and proprietor of the Vagina Chronicles.org. We'll be back in a moment with ESP Speaks.
So important for you to understand that your birthing process starts way before you even get pregnant. So if you're even considering and you're not even pregnant right now, it's important for you to prepare for your birth. One of the things you can do is watching a birth. So if you've never seen one and haven't had the opportunity to, watch a birth, see what it's like. It's important to know what's going to happen to your body. Also, what's important is finding someone who knows, an expert, and doulas are experts in labor, birth, postpartum, all of the above. They can coach you through this time. They've seen it a number of times. They know what to expect. It's important to find resources that are going to help you. Also, you can find some prenatal classes that will prepare you for that. That's super important. And talking to your provider about expectations during birth, again, reviewing your birth plan before you go in. Those are the things that you want to think about while preparing for your birth.
And we're back with ESP Speaks. Thanks for returning. This has been a stimulating conversation. We're here with Aiyana Davison, certified nursing professional. She's a certified midwife. She's a women's healthcare specialist. She's just everything combined giving us an education on childbirth and being in the hospital and women's health care, and I'm so excited. But we were on a roll before our commercial break, and we had just had the baby.
Right.
And now we have to talk about a very specific subject that does not get enough attention, especially with women of color. It's been a taboo thing. You're not supposed to talk about postpartum depression or any of the mood elements that are involved. And there are a list of things that people don't realize that are happening that we need to address. So I'm going to step back again, and we're going to jump right back in with Aiyana Davison.
Yes. So postpartum, the whole postpartum time frame is really taken for granted, just as much as I think pregnancy preparation and how important it is to be prepared. You need to be prepared for the postpartum time frame as well. What people don't realize is sometimes their anxiety and depression that they experienced even before they got pregnant continues through the pregnancy. It doesn't just stop. It actually can get worse. And then that can continue through your postpartum time frame. Also, typically we define postpartum as once you've had the baby to, they say 6 to 12 weeks out, but really it's like the rest of your life. Because there's so much that happens, not just physically, but there's a shift that happens, and we don't give enough credit to the birther and the parents. Like you're grieving the loss of self as you once knew yourself to be. You are now a parent. You're in charge of this life. And also, once you deliver that placenta, a whole bunch happens. Like your hormones now shift. I've talked about it a little bit on my page too, where people go through this response to the rapid decrease or shift in hormones. And what happens is your body responds to that, and you sometimes will shake. Sometimes you're in this trance where you're like still trying to take in what happened. But specific to the postpartum time frame, what is now being more popularized is postpartum mood disorders, which had long been, again, a secret in many communities. And it's not just the depression. I don't want to say that as if I'm minimizing postpartum depression, but there's postpartum depression, there's postpartum anxiety, there's postpartum traumatic stress disorder, like a PTSD. There's postpartum psychosis, which is like a medical emergency, and that's usually accompanies suicidal or homicidal thoughts, and going well beyond that. And the factors of being a new parent and irregularities with sleep and these irregularities with the hormones all can contribute to some of the mood disorders that we see.
And not having the village around you like it used to be to help maintenance, right, and take care of these things is a big deal. You can't have these babies by yourself. It's not just about going into the hospital and having them. It's about the aftercare. Laundry is a big deal. Sleep deprivation is a big deal.
Yeah.
The lack of sex is a big deal, especially with your husband. He has his needs too. You put all of these things together. You can't go back to work. Those are just the teeny things on the list. There's so much more. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm agreeing and going, yes, sister girl, yes.
It's so much to think about. And I think, again, we focus so much on your pregnancy, your body changes, your birth, and then postpartum drop you off here, and you're supposed to be able to cope with this all on your own.
Girl, I think my postpartum lasted 42 years.
I mean,
the oldest one is 42. The last one is 15. I'm still going through it.
They call it the fourth trimester, and how long does that last? I mean, I dare to say it's inevitable. Like it's long standing. You are in your fourth trimester. until either you stop breathing or, you know, your child stops breathing, whatever. Because
y'all graduate from college.
and even then, like, you know, you're still in it's this ever-changing situation. But the village and the ritual, which is inherent to Black people and Indigenous people, we performed ceremonies, the closing of the bones, the closing of the womb, the cleansing out of the womb. These are the things that they told us to stop doing, you
Yes.
know.
Because it was primitive.
Yeah, it's primitive. It wasn't safe or sterile, or you know, it could cause infection. When in actuality, if you look at what the herbs that were used and things of that nature, and the rituals that were performed were actually healing. And you go into certain cultures where, like, certain Latino cultures, or Hispanic cultures will say it's I think it's quarantina, or it's essentially called a quarantine. Like, you don't leave the house for 42 days. You're in the house. If someone needs to go to the store for you, they do it. You're in the house, warm things. People are giving you soups, all this stuff. Every culture is a little different in how they care for postpartum, but there's belief behind it, and
exactly.
You know, there's purpose behind it. It's not just we just do this to do it, you know. But it's a very important time frame, that shift. You know, being prepared means sometimes booking your therapy appointment before you have the baby, in anticipation.
That's a whole nother show, because, you know, some of us still don't believe in therapy. That's a whole nother thing that we have to address.
Listen, God is good, but he wants us to work for things. Like, we can't just sit here and expect for him to just, he will reach down his hand. I very much believe that, but also he helps those who helps themselves.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
so I mean, we're sitting here again. This is what I want to break, is this secrecy that, oh, like, she, you know, she's been feeling this type of ways. Enough. Shout it from the rooftops, because you're not gonna get no help if you're sitting there quiet to yourself.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's important for you to care for yourself and prepare just as much for postpartum as you do for pregnancy.
Yes, ma'am. And once again, we are so grateful to have you here. We have run our hour, but we are doing a part 2 with Aiyana Davison, because we still have to go into the placentas, the nutrients, the afterbirth, the whole thing. So that's going to be on our next, and the care, the hospital care, in terms of how much the doulas cost, and how much the midwifery outside of the hospital costs, because you can still have a baby at home. So we're going to be talking about that in our next episode. But we are so grateful and so glad that you were here with us this time. And I want to make sure that I get this in, because I really need you to talk about the Vagina Chronicles, and how we can tap into you, and how everybody can get on your life is Instagram. That's where you're at right now. How they can get to you on Instagram. And I'm going to put all of that stuff up at the end of the show. I'm going to have a little plaque with your face and all of your information, but just tell them for now.
Sure. If folks want to find me, I am on Instagram a lot. Well, maybe not that much, but the most of my information goes there first, and that is the Vagina Chronicles. That's the tag. And then I do occasionally hit up Twitter, not very regularly, and that's the Vag Chronicles, or Vag Chronicle. It wouldn't let me be great and say the whole thing. You can also find me on my website.
You are great, Aiyana. You are great.
You can also find me on my website, the Vagina Chronicles.org. And I am working on building up that community. So please bear with me, but we're making some changes and hoping to get more information for you, and some other surprises along the way. So that will be in the works for end of the year and early 2021. Those are the ways you can reach me. My email is accessible through all of those platforms. So,
and it's not just client-based. It's not just pregnant women. It's a resource of information. And if you are a midwife, if you are a doula, there is a whole conversation going on in there. I tapped into a couple of those conversations where you're actually talking to each other, which is awesome because you're sharing ideas, you're sharing techniques, you're actually showing apparatuses. So lay people like me can see, oh, wow, what's that? And understand what it is before it has to be used, or if it has to be used in the pregnancy. And you talk about gynecological health. It's not just babies, it's about women's health, it's about our health, and it's about stretching out into the community and equipping our women to be strong. And we thank you. We're so honored by you. I'm honored by you. This is a moment for me. I'm so honored by you picking up your grandmother's mantle and carrying our family traditions on your back. I am proud, 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 proud. And I know that she is proud looking down on you. You are such a blessing. You're amazing. Thank you so much for Aiyana Davison being with us. And thank you, the audience, for being with us. We always enjoy you being here with us. So we'll see you next week as we continue with part 2 with Aiyana Davison and the Vagina Chronicles. Until then, you know what I'm going to say. Be positive, test negative. We'll see you next time on ESP Speaks. Have a great one. And that's